The war of the future is no longer a distant idea or a tale of science fiction. It is not a Hollywood movie, and it is not just a chapter in a military strategy book. It is happening right now, here in Eastern Europe, and its name is Ukraine. What began in 2022 as a classic invasion, with Russian tanks advancing toward Kyiv, has 3 years later become something very different. A testing ground where new weapons are born and new tactics emerge every single day. And what is most striking is that it is not always the most expensive missiles or the heaviest tanks that decide the course of the war. Today, what is changing everything is much smaller, but just as deadly. Ukraine is building long-range drones capable of flying hundreds of kilometers and striking directly at the heart of Russia. These are machines that cost only a fraction of the targets they destroy. And they are forcing Moscow to reinforce its defenses like never before. When Russia launched its initial offensive, many international experts believed victory would be swift. The Russian army was one of the largest in the world, with thousands of tanks, fighter jets, and a nuclear arsenal that commanded respect. But what Moscow did not anticipate was the fierce resistance of the Ukrainians, their coordination with allies, and above all, their ingenuity in adapting and creating new weapons. That combination turned the war into something far more complex. A living laboratory where tactics, strategies, and technologies are tested every day, developments that will likely define the conflicts of the 21st century. Today, the face of war has changed. We no longer see only armies clashing in trenches or fighter jets dominating the skies. What truly makes the difference are the invisible eyes patrolling above. Drones, machines that watch, spy, and strike with surgical precision. In a matter of minutes, they can turn a target into ruins, and the most astonishing part is that many of these devices cost only a fraction of the equipment they destroy. The contrast is brutal. A state-of-the-art battle tank can cost millions of dollars and requires a highly trained crew to operate. By comparison, an FPV drone, those small aircraft controlled in first-person, costs only a few $100s. And yet, it can pierce the roof of a tank and disable it within seconds. This imbalance in cost is revolutionizing not only the economics of war, but also its very morale. What must soldiers feel after training their entire lives to operate such imposing machines when they realize that a simple hobby drone, fitted with a homemade explosive, can bring it all to an end in an instant? This is the human and technological dilemma that defines today's war. Victory no longer goes to the side with the most tanks or soldiers, but to the one that sees first, strikes from farther away, and uses technology more cleverly. That is why military analysts and political leaders already say it openly. What is happening in Ukraine is the opening chapter of the so-called war of the future. But behind every statistic, every drone, and every damaged tank, there are people. Families fleeing under bombardment. Children growing up to the sound of air raid sirens instead of school bells. Young soldiers turning into drone operators almost overnight. In the end, the war of the future is not fought between autonomous machines and algorithms. It still weighs on the shoulders of human beings who feel fear, hope, and exhaustion. And perhaps that is the hardest part of all. The modernity of weapons does not erase the ancient pain of war. If there is one symbol that defines this war, it is the drone. At the start of the invasion in 2022, they were nothing more than simple commercial quadcopters adapted with small explosive charges. 3 years later, those improvised machines have become precision weapons capable of altering the balance of an entire region. Right now, Ukraine is preparing long-range drones that not only fly over trenches, but can reach the very heart of Russia. A Ukrainian startup called Point is developing models known as Flamingo, capable of flying hundreds of kilometers and striking oil refineries, military bases, and fuel depots. The results are already visible. According to international agencies, up to 17% of Russia's refining capacity has been put out of service after recent attacks, causing gasoline shortages, blackouts, and long lines at gas stations. In a country where oil sustains much of the economy, that blow hurts as much as a defeat on the battlefield. In the Black Sea, innovation has become even bolder. Ukraine has deployed naval drones packed with explosives that hurl themselves against frigates and warships. These small vessels, modest in appearance and low in cost, have damaged the Russian fleet and forced it to retreat, something that seemed unthinkable just a few years ago. There was even the first recorded successful attack on a helicopter stationed at a coastal base. These are scenes that starkly reveal how the cheap can overpower the expensive, and how the improvised can surpass the sophisticated. But not everything happens in the skies or at sea. In the trenches, FPV drones are the soldiers' daily nightmare. They fly low, are controlled in first person, and dive in suicidal attacks against armored vehicles. An American officer put it bluntly: "There is no open ground left where you can advance without being seen by a drone." The phrase reflects a brutal change. Where tanks once dominated the open battlefield, today every advance can become a deadly trap from above. And that is where the tanks come in, the old kings of land warfare. For decades, a German Leopard 2 or an American Abrams was synonymous with unquestionable power. In Ukraine, some of these tanks arrived as a symbol of hope, and yet several were destroyed as soon as they reached the front. Images of burned-out Abrams and Leopards spread across social media, showing the world that even the most advanced technology can fall to a drone worth only a few $1,000s. Russia knows this well too. Its T-72s and T-90s have suffered the same fate, reduced to smoldering wreckage after an improvised aerial strike. Armies adapt as best they can. Iron cages over the turrets, electronic defenses, improvised armor. At times, they look more like medieval war machines than weapons of the 21st century. And still, it is not enough. The tank can no longer advance alone, can no longer break through without support. Today, it depends on Allied drones to clear the path, on infantry to watch the skies, and on electronic systems to blind the enemy. The lesson is harsh but clear. The tank is not dead, but it is no longer the king of the battlefield. In this war, it has gone from predator to prey. And that, beyond Ukraine and Russia, is a message to every army in the world. The era of armored supremacy is over, and the future is no longer decided by heavy steel, but by swarms buzzing in the sky, changing the fate of a war in seconds. What is happening right now in Ukraine is not just a local war. It is a mirror of how future conflicts will unfold. The long-range drones now targeting Russian refineries, the unmanned vessels ramming warships in the Black Sea, and the tanks that can no longer move without fear, all of this marks a turning point in the way war is waged. In the coming weeks, we will likely see more Ukrainian attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure. Refineries, fuel depots, and strategic ports are in the crosshairs, because the logic is clear: strike the economy to weaken Moscow's ability to sustain its offensive. But with every drone that crosses the border, the risk of escalation also grows. Russia has already reinforced its air defenses with S-300 and S-400 systems around its major cities. And although these shields are powerful, recent history shows that no system is infallible. For soldiers on the front lines, the immediate future means more drones in the sky, more uncertainty in every move, and a constant sense of vulnerability. For civilians, both in Ukraine and in Russia, war translates into nights filled with sirens and underground shelters, or into endless lines at gas stations and markets where prices rise without control. On both sides, ordinary people pay the highest price for a struggle that shows no signs of ending soon. And here arises the hardest question of all. Where is this transformation taking us? The war of the future has already begun, and in Ukraine, we are only witnessing the beginning. A war where the cheap defeats the expensive, where a drone built in an improvised workshop can decide the fate of a city, and where the heavy steel of tanks no longer guarantees safety. Perhaps the most painful reflection is this. While technology advances at an astonishing speed, the human tragedy remains the same as always. Families separated, lives interrupted, young men sent to a front that has become a testing ground for the weapons of tomorrow. The question is no longer whether war will change, but whether the world will learn anything from what is happening today, here and now.